some of the stories today, but let's start with this. How about Houston? After the dramatic overtime win in which they blew that big lead at halftime against Baylor, they are the number 1 ranked team in the country, 3 of the top 8 from the Big 12, and Baylor slips to 15 after losses to BYU and then at home to Houston, and they've got themselves a dicey one tonight in Fort Worth. We'll get to that in a moment. But the Cougars are number 1 in the country.
Yeah, and look, they're tearing through the best basketball league in the country, so they should be number 1, although, you can make a case for, UConn just took a loss last week, so that also kind of opens up the door for Houston to be there. I went to the Houston-Baylor game, and while it wound up being a great game and, went into overtime, and I have many thoughts about how even that happened, but in the first half, they kind of showed who they can be. When they're hitting on all cylinders, they can just throw you around. And Yves Missi is going to be an NBA pick this next, in June. But Roberts just threw him around like he wasn't even there the entire game. And they're so physical and so well coached, and they don't waste a second of basketball in that whole game. And they remind me a lot of Baylor in 21 and a little bit of Kansas in 22, in that they're just so defensively relentless that you can never really feel comfortable on a run. Like when Baylor came back, they never went on like a long 19-2 run or anything. They had to chip away.
Yep, 4-1, 3-2, 4-2, little runs like that. And then there was an 8-0 run to start the second half that kick-started it. And Craig, Houston won. Of course, KU and also Iowa State, Baylor ranked. Not as many in the top 25 because everybody, some fell out because everyone's beating each other up in the end.
Yeah, they have ran out of opportunities to kind of bounce back and forth like they have been, keeping about 7 or 8 teams in there in the top 25 because now the losses are starting to pile up. But I think it'll all make them better. Iron sharpens iron and whatnot. But credit to Houston for the huge win on Saturday. They made that look like it was going to be a blowout early on, and I don't know how we'd all be feeling if Baylor hadn't made the second half comeback that they did, because that was looking like it was going to get pretty ugly. And the Bears, to their credit, were able to fight back and obviously make it very interesting getting into overtime. But tough loss at home, tough week, losing back-to-back games. But for Houston, who we started with the focus on, rightfully so, the number 1 team in the country. I do think the Big 12 right now, and I know there's debates that can be had. This isn't I'm drawing the line in the sand. If you disagree, you're a POS or anything like that. If you think another league's better, that's fine. But I'll sit there and stand with the Big 12 for right now. And so they're the best team in the best league. And with UConn losing, I think that just makes it a no-brainer that they would be number 1. So congrats to Kelvin Sampson and company. Got a long way to go, but we're getting near the end of the conference part of the schedule right now, the part 2 of 3. And, they're really just a fantastic basketball team that's made this transition into the Big 12 pretty easy. We knew that basketball-wise they'd be okay, but what a load of dynamite they brought to the table by being as good as they are, as quickly as they are. So, yeah, that was fun to see. And, Paul, I'm curious, what were your impressions of Foster Pavilion and just the whole scene with Houston in town on Saturday?
Oh, it's great. Every complaint that I've read people have about the stadium, I do not agree with. Now, listen, you're entitled to your own opinion. There was something that said that the seats are too close together. And look, I'm a gravy boy, a beefy tea, a husky child. And I felt comfortable in the seats when I actually was sitting in them, and most of the time I sat in our media seat. But when I was there, I will say they are very close together, but I hate to break it to people who don't like that, but that's how stadiums work, because you want people packed in. You want a warm experience with your fellow fans of whatever team you are, and it's very packed in. The only thing I will say is it took me a minute when we went to our original seats. They're very high up, so I was getting the camera angle in person, and it's steep, so it takes a second to get used to. But once you are used to it, you're used to it.
And I've gotten used to even the angle. I know the camera angle is debated.
Yeah.
Bottom line is, after the game was over, Kelvin Sampson in the post game. I watched it on the way home from Dallas yesterday. I listened to it and watched it. Said he loves the atmosphere, not just because they won the game. He thought it was just amazing.
Yeah.
He felt like at one point, he goes, you feel, how many they seat? 7,500? He felt like you could have named a number and he would have agreed with you of how many people seemed like were inside that arena.
Here's what I'll say Baylor has to do going forward. They just have to continue to be good fans and learn more how to be good fans. And they've made some in-game changes to the experience, I think, that are really good and long overdue. A lot of times stuff that Baylor did in the Farrell Center and it actually spilled over to McLean Stadium can feel to me like a church picnic, and that's not what it should feel like. And this did not feel like it. This is one of the first Baylor events I've been to in a long time that did not feel like somebody was about to go, hey, by the way, our kids are going over to the Dominican Republic to build a house. And that's a great thing, but that's not what I want when I'm at a stadium. It's a great in-game atmosphere as they build that and the fans know what it's really like to participate in the basketball game in an arena that can give you a home court advantage as opposed to...
They've lost twice in 4 overtimes, basically.
But they have that advantage. The Farrell Center is a multi-use facility that they use for basketball, and Baylor's not the only school in the country that has to do that. I think that if more people saw and are able to do what Baylor has done and create a basketball facility for a basketball school, which Baylor very much is, then it would be great. And it's great for the sport. It's great for the conference. It's great for anybody who comes in there. It's an awesome game experience.
All right, so there we are. Congratulations, Houston, #1. UConn losing had something to do with that to Creighton, but they are #1 in the country. Now, tonight, a couple of different games, including Baylor trying to, in basically 48 hours, less than that, much less than that, actually, because they played Saturday morning, early afternoon, is they will play at TCU, who beat them in triple overtime in Waco, and then West Virginia at K-State. That game is at 6 o'clock. By the way, Kansas State beating BYU over the weekend allowed that loss by Baylor to K-State to remain a quad 1 loss, which is a good thing. I mean, if you're going to lose a game, you don't want it to be quad 2 or quad 3 because of how they put all those particular groupings together. Also, the standings now through the weekend, and you have Houston with that 1-game lead against Iowa State. Remember, they split during the regular season. And then Kansas, Baylor, TCU, and Tech in a clump. KU in third with 2 games back. And then on top of that, Oklahoma, BYU, 7-7. Texas, K-State, and on down the rest of the Big 12 standings. There are 4 games left. Most everybody, I think, has now played 14. Yes, they have. There are 4 games left in the regular season.
This is Houston's to lose. I mean, very clearly with 4 games to go. So Iowa State seems like they've got a shot. I think outside of that, expecting Houston to lose 2 and then somebody else like a Kansas to make up 2 is kind of hard to assume with the way that they're playing right now. So, yeah, I mean, they're right there within reach. Iowa State has an opportunity, obviously, just being the 1 game back. But for Houston, you're looking at Cincy, you're looking at road trips to Oklahoma and UCF, and then you're looking at Kansas there at the very end in what should be a pretty fun showdown. So, yeah, they're sitting there with the lead right now, but Iowa State can still make it interesting, and some others just hovering around here, but running out of time to have made too much of a difference there.
Well, it's really hard to see Houston losing 2 more than everybody else would for the rest of the way out.
The other team would Iowa State would have to win out.
Yeah. And then, Iowa State winning out or Kansas winning out when you're probably not going to see Kevin McCullough for the rest of the regular season, that they're going to hold. I would bet that you don't see Kevin McCullough in the regular season or the Big 12 tournament, and that the next time we see him in a game is the NCAA tournament. And so that's going to be a big thing. So seeing somebody overtake them, it's hard to do the math. Before you even get into who would do it, they'd have to fall on their face
Iowa
first.
State's only a game back.
Yeah, but even then, you've got to, Houston's.
But if they slip, I don't know how they would do the tiebreaker, probably who you lost to in the rest of the standings. And I don't remember Houston lost a couple of games early. But it's Iowa State right there with them. That's why they're also, along with KU, ranked inside the top 10. Again, Baylor on the road tonight in Fort Worth to play TCU.
They better win that game.
I agree. There's not a game left, and of course, this could be even if it was you're playing a Cincinnati or an Oklahoma State. You could at least feel good about that. With all due respect, they play their last 4 games are against tonight TCU on the road, who had beaten them. You also have the road game at the end of the year against Tech in Lubbock, And then also in between that, you have Kansas and also Texas at home. And Texas beat Baylor, and so did Kansas earlier in the year.
They screw around and lose 6 games to close out the regular season if they're not careful.
Could be.
I mean, there's not
Absolutely
a single guaranteed win
Yep.
there. I know that you expect that you should at least win a couple of those games you just mentioned, but it's quite possible you could lose all 4 of those games, and you've already lost a couple in a row. So, yeah, they really need to get a win tonight against TCU because that could be a little slippery slope that you don't want to be riding along right now if you're Scott Drew and company.
We'll have Randy Peterson, who covers Iowa State, on the offensive coordinator job being filled. Remember, their other job, that job went to a young man that went out west to the NFL, Shieldhouse. Here's the bracketology. This is from Joe Lunardi, ESPN, and it's not an easy read because there's a lot there, but the bracketology showing that you have who's the number 1 seeds. Purdue, Arizona, UConn, and Houston. Baylor's a 4 seed. Iowa State is a 3 seed. Kansas is a 2 seed. So you have those 4 teams from the Big 12 among the 4 seeds. And as Craig was mentioning, because of who Baylor plays down the stretch, they can win a couple of those 4. Who knows, maybe even do better than that. They're really dangerous enough to be good, and also erratic enough to where they just have these bubbles of time in almost every game where that puts them in trouble. The last 4 byes, Texas is a part of that. Also, if you look, the last group right there, Kansas State, next 4 out, so it doesn't look good for Jerome Tang and K-State. But they did get the nice win against BYU over the weekend. Now, also on top of that,